Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. An original adaptation written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Part 1. Christmas at Camelot. It was a most extraordinary Christmas. No, it was the most extraordinary Christmas. The most extraordinary Christmas anyone could remember. Please don't misunderstand me. I don't mean that this Christmas time was somehow quirky or a little unusual. I mean that it was extraordinary. It was cold, as most winters are, but this was not the cold that numbed the skin and chilled the bones. This was the cold that invigorates and shocks you into life, like plunging into an ice-cold pool beneath a thundering waterfall. Snow blanketed the terrain, an ermine stole that muted the landscape with an eerie, expectant silence. The air was rich, steeped in the sense of excitement and the promises of warmth. For many of us, Christmas time means a time for family, fun and festivities. Christmas jumpers may be worn, a thoughtful gift from a loved one may be given, the dusty bottle of sherry is brought off the shelf for Grandma, and if we're lucky, Christmas dinner lives up to our year-long expectations. This wasn't that. In the court of Camelot, where King Arthur and Queen Guinevere gathered with the famous Knights of the Round Table, Christmas lasted a full 15 days. What's more, half of that time was spent jousting, hunting and wrestling. Tourneys were traditional, swords were swung, and fists would fly. And when they weren't out lunging forward with lowered lances, Arthur and his knights were singing carols, dancing merrily, and feasting for hours on end. And as soon as that was over, it was back out into the fields for more jousts and trials and challenges. For Arthur and his knights, you see, this was a time of celebration. And his knights celebrated few things more than an opportunity to prove themselves in a challenge, to win renown and recognition and respect among some of the most famous faces in the land. Sir Bors was there, of course, and Sir Bedivere, and Sir Kay, and Killock, and Gaheris, and Galahad, and Peridor, and Pellinore, and, of course, the legendary Lancelot. All these fine fighters had won rich reward in the competitions, and were now lounging luxuriously around the table, swapping stories and comparing bruises from the day's activities, showing off to the ladies with exaggerated tales of their might and magnificence. It was New Year's Eve. There were still several days of feasting and festivity ahead of them, and the great hall of Camelot was crackling with clamouring chatter. Arthur sat in his usual seat, with his keen-eyed queen beside him, and next to her was a young knight by the name of Gawain. Gawain was not chatting merrily. In fact, he wasn't doing much of anything merrily just then. Where other knights around the table leant forward eagerly, laughing and joking with their neighbours and friends, Gawain sat back in his chair and stared sullenly into his drink. He had not done well in the contests and competitions of the last few days, and he was starting to feel like he just never would. He took another drink and looked moodily round the table. His eyes were momentarily drawn by a pretty young serving maid, and he pulled out his best smile to show her. It was a good smile. He knew it was, because he'd practiced it 100 times, and it had never failed to get him attention from the ladies. The young maid caught his eye. She saw the smile and gave a smile of her own. There was a soft blush to her cheeks, and Gawain was just thinking this evening might not be a complete loss after all, when a hand touched his arm, and he looked up to find the eyes of the queen twinkling down at him. "Oh, she's very pretty," said Guinevere, and Gawain felt his face begin to flush with embarrassment at being caught staring. "Oh, who? Is she? I hadn't noticed." "Oh, had you not?" asked the queen, raising an eyebrow. "I could have sworn that famous smile of yours had slipped onto your face, and you were trying to turn your moody moping into a heartfelt brooding stare. Oh, so full of depth and mystery you are, Gawain." The queen was smiling at him now, and Gawain felt his face turn crimson. "But how many pretty young serving girls would that make, eh, chasing you round the court now? I swear I can hardly keep count of your conquests and the trail of broken hearts behind you." Her tone had changed, and there was still a smile, but now it was the sort of patient smile a teacher gives a student while they're waiting for them to grasp a lesson. "Well," blurted Gawain. "Well," he struggled to find something else to follow it with. "Well, it might be the only thing I'm actually good at." He shut his mouth again, hurriedly, slightly shocked at his own admission, and sank back into his chair, his sour mood returning. Romancing young impressionable ladies? Come now, Gawain, you have more strings to your bow than that. Well, it doesn't feel like it, barked Gawain. I've had no luck in the jousts, I've lost most of my sword bouts, and he paused, remembering a moment of sore embarrassment. I even lost a singing competition against boars. Who knew the man had the voice of an angel? He's got the face of a goat. Guinevere laughed merrily, her eyes shining. Sir Bors does have hidden depths. Deeply hidden. But then so do you, Gawain. Well, it doesn't feel like it, repeated Gawain. Here we are, surrounded by men of myth and majesty with grand reputations, and I can't even win a singing contest against the ugliest man in all Britain. I'll never be able to prove myself amongst them. I swear, if it wasn't for the fact that I'm the king's own nephew, I would have been... He paused again, lowering his voice for fear of being overheard. I would have been sent away. He stared into his cup, feeling the Queen's eyes boring into him but not being able to bring himself to meet them. Eventually she spoke. Do you think so lowly of yourself, Sir Gawain? She emphasized the sir, and Gawain realized he had perhaps been less thoughtful of who he was speaking to than he should have been. If indeed you cannot see the good within yourself, Guinevere went on, trust that my husband, the king, can. He does not give the rank of knight lightly, and certainly not simply because you are his nephew. He sees something in you, Gawain. But it's no good if you cannot see it in yourself. Gawain's shoulders slumped as the truth of her words sank in. I'm sorry, my lady. I did not mean to question the king's judgment. I am sure you did not, Guinevere replied, and once again the sparkle was back in her eyes and the laugh in her voice. And I know it can be hard to see our own achievements as worthy of the rank and renown we happily give to others. I'm guilty of it myself. But did I not hear from Sir Peridor that you were of some great assistance in fighting back a brood of sorcerous witches not a few months back? A man who stands by his fellows and does that is no one to be taken lightly. Well, I might have helped a bit, Gawain confessed. But I just don't feel like I've had the chance to prove myself, you know. Oh, Gawain, you fool, the Queen replied, without malice. Most men spend their lives hoping they will never have to prove themselves. But if that's your heart's desire, I am certain you'll find it before long. Chances like that come often to those who go looking for them. Gawain was unsure how to take this, but before he could ask Guinevere more, King Arthur stood, and the room fell silent. My lords and ladies, said the king, raising his goblet in a toast, the old year lies almost fully behind us, and the great gift of a new year rushes forward to greet us. I know of no finer group of people I should like to see that year in with than these right here before me, and so I raise a toast to fine folk and fabulous feasting. There was a cheer around the room as everyone smiled warmly and drank heartily. But I am not yet ready to be done with today's competitions. No more fighting, he said, waving down a few knights who were already on their feet and rolling up their sleeves. I have a competition of a different form in mind. I have a hankering for a tall tale to be told. In fact, I shall not eat until I have heard a story to set my soul stirring, and so I declare that whoever can spin the best yarn in this hall shall earn themselves the finest cuts of all the meat tonight, and shall eat better than a king. There was another cheer, and immediately people began standing up around the table to share a story. The guests threw themselves into the challenge with great gusto, all competing to outdo the last. When it came to Gawain's turn, though, he waved them by and buried his face in his goblet. Somehow he did not feel he had any stories worth sharing, not like the rest of these mighty men. The knights moved on, though, all getting louder and louder, drawing gales and shrieks of laughter from around the room. It looked as though the prize was going to Sir Owain for a particularly bawdy tale he told involving a young maiden, a forester, and an extremely angry goat, when a small voice spoke up from the edge of the table. I believe I have a tale to tell, said the voice, and the room fell silent. Thank you for listening. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a Settle Stories commission. Written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Story consultant was Miriam Sarin. Music was Tectonic by Saedra, downloaded via Uppbeat. It was a Parable Arts production.